everybody and welcome back to LMM, and if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, the links to our social media are coming up on the screen now. Today I'm going to the pub and I'm doing it in the best way possible because I'm going in this. Today I am particularly excited. You see, this big thing behind me remains at the top of my all-time want list. I've always wanted some road steam and always dreamt of a steam roller. This is an Aveling Porter D-type, and this was built in 1928 and is, well, pretty much stereotypical in most of its appearance to a standard steamroller. This is what you think when you think steamroller. However, it is a little bit different. The most notable thing on this is it's a compound. So that means rather than just having one cylinder, there are two. But the second cylinder doesn't take its steam direct from the boiler. Once the steam has gone through the first cylinder and pushed the piston, it then enters the second one, driving that one. So you're getting like a 2-for-1 thing going on. It's really quite cool. And this one indeed runs on piston valves rather than slide valves, which are a lot more common. The difference mostly being that a slide valve looks like that and clamps over the top, and a piston valve looks like a piston. Theoretically a bit more efficient, and it's said that a piston valve wears out and a slide valve wears in. The other big difference is that when you're priming, a slide valve will kind of lift off and allow the water to bypass. Piston valves don't, they just go bang in quite a spectacular and bad way and cause massive amounts of damage. And so it was something that Aveling trialled between 1921 and 29, and apparently they got to the end of this period and went, yeah, and went back to slide valves. So that's the thing that makes this stand out a little bit. She is an 8-ton roller, or at least she's plated as being an 8-ton roller. In actuality, she weighs in excess of 10 tons, and this seems to be a fairly standard thing for steamrollers because the single cylinder variant of this also weighed 8 tons when it left the factory, despite having one less cylinder and half the motion. I think whoever's job it was just like, 8-ton, stamp. Yep, next one, 8-ton, stamp. Well, that one's a bit bigger. Let's say that's a 10-ton, stamp. And that was as far as they went. A big one, 10-ton, smaller one, 8-ton, tiny one, 6-ton. Jobs. I love it. There are stories, in fact, of some steamrollers like this that would go out for a job one day with a 10-ton plate on the side, and the next day that plate would be turned upside down. It would say 8-ton underneath it because same thing, different jobs. I love it. And at this point, can we just appreciate how mind-bogglingly gorgeous it is? It is an absolute piece of art. And right now it's ticking over beautifully, which is one of the things I love. And being a compound as well, we can get it going nice and slowly. And this is how, if I had one of them, I would spend my entire day just sat with a drink of a Coke or a chocolate milk and just sat appreciating this thing. It is art in motion, isn't it? It is absolutely fantastically beautiful. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I love this. I mean, green is as well the correct colour for a steamroller. It looks super lined out like this. It's just magnificently beautiful. And the other thing for me personally is a canopy. A steamroller needs a canopy to be complete. Without the canopy, it looks kind of bare, but canopy, this is just perfect. When I think steamroller, this is what I think. It's wonderful. I cannot tell you how excited I am by the concept of going out and having a run on this day, because I haven't done road steam in like a decade. So the excitement levels are somewhere up here. It's great. So a couple of the key features of steamroller. On the front here, we've got a bracket so you can tow it out from where it's stored. And it also being an Aveling and Porter, it's got the dancing horse here with a Victor written across the front, which is just a very stereotypical part of it. And that is what a steamroller is. There are many other companies that made steamrollers, but that there is the face of a steamroller. And you might notice the rolls also that we have two here. That's so again they can turn independently as we're going around corners too. So there's a less skidding going on. But absolutely lovely. And then we have here brackets like on a railway engine, but so you can mount a lamp on the side of it. Steering, of course, is done on chains, these. So there's an awful lot of slack in this as this all wobbles. And then you look at the casting at the front here and imagine the stress that is going through this, because that's your pivot there and then it's bolted to the front smoke box here. And you might go, well, that's quite a distance it's coming out there. That's unnecessary stress in there. Not quite. You see, it needs to be this distance away so that you can actually turn this whole structure here to actually give you a turning circle which is less than a ship. And also, in order to ash it out, we need to be able to open the smoke box down here, so there needs to be enough space for that to hinge up so we can get to the front tube plate. It's just mind-boggling when you just look at that. It's spectacular. And then, because this one is a piston valve engine, we have these spring-operated drain cocks. The idea is if you carry water, these will lift automatically and allow the water to drain out the drain cocks. We can do that manually as well, but that's still part of it there. Now, there are a couple of holes across here and here which should hold a sprinkler that goes over the front roll, but it's not fitted, and the owner is of the opinion that it will get done eventually, but maintaining and keeping this going is more important than adding the sprinkler. And again, over here we have our motion beautifully ticking away in a spellbinding way. It's something that's always fascinated me since I was that big, just looking at this motion ticking over. It's absolutely fantastic. And in there, behind this flywheel, it is a fully balanced crank. So it should be totally balanced and have no point where it wants to be unbalanced, which is a fantastic piece of workmanship. Then coming over here, we have what was the standard tri-wheel arrangement of a road roller. On this side, we also have pins here. So the drive wheel being t'other side, if we want to keep the wheels locked, we keep this pin in, and it means that everything rotates together. If we're doing lots of turning and we want to have basically a differential, we pull the pin out, and that means that only the driven wheel goes around and the other one just free wheels. Currently they're both plugged in because that makes sense. And then we have this wonderful drum brake through there, and yes, that is our entire brake operated off this. I find that a fantastic bit of system for braking there. And then we have scrapers here. There would, again, on this strap here, there would have been the water sprinkler for the rear roller, but that's not fitted as well. But you've got the scrapers tool, and then of course toolbox on the back, which is fantastic. The rear drawbar, it's just all so. Even though I never saw these running, I think most people still, or at least of my generation, you think of road roller, this is what comes to mind first before you think of the diesels that replace it, or the little two tandem rollers that you see going around today. Even though that's what we see on almost a day-to-day basis working on our roads, you still think of this when you think road roller. It's just fantastic. And to think that these were being used like into and beyond the 60s, they were still using these for doing road working contract work. I think that's absolutely stunningly brilliant. And the fact that it's still here, this is the thing that I love about heritage, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, this should not be here anymore. It's coming up to being 100 years old. It's getting there. It was designed to build roads back in the day where you just compacted the road down and crushed it into oblivion, not what we have today, a different type of road. And it's still here. It shouldn't still be here. This has gone beyond its useful life. When it was built, nobody thought, someone's going to enjoy trundling around on this, crushing the roads in the future. No one thought that. No one thought it will still be here, and yet it's still here. It's a wonderfully bonkers thing to still have. And the fact that it is still here, and the fact that it's still able to go out and run, it's nothing short of absolutely marvellous. It's mad, isn't it? Heritage and preservation is absolutely bonkers. This was supplied new in 28 to the Bournemouth Corporation, who, amongst looking after the roads, also operated the tramway. So this would have had a variety of work working around there and looking after various different forms of transportation. Now, you may see the plate on the side and go, well, is that its name? No, currently it does not have a name, or at least not an official name, because the owner just refers to it as the stupid Once Bournemouth Corporation had finished with it, sometime in the early 50s, it was sold and went to J. Arnold, who were another road-making contractors, and it stayed with them, still in use, until the late 60s, at which point the preservation movement had begun, and so it was purchased for preservation, and then sold again and went to another owner, who kept it down in Dorset all the way up to 2008, where it was stopped needing repairs, and it was sold to the current owner, who bought it thinking, well, this is a great idea. And as it sits here, seeming away, ticking over, I agree with him. It is an absolutely superb idea. The countless hours and long nights, and not to mention substantial sum of money that has gone to get it back to this stage, During the process, several times he has doubted his decision because he only actually steamed in his ownership in 2019. He bought it in 2014. That's a long time of looking at things, hitting stuff and trying to reassemble it. And to him and everyone else who does this on it, a massive credit, because the satisfaction the first time that it steamed must have been incredible. And then all the anticipation of all the events that you were going to go to in 2019 and 2020. Yeah, of course, none of that happened, did it? So this thing, his ownership, hasn't really gone out and done anything, which means that this trip is all the more special because it's a rare trip out for this engine and one of the few things it's actually done this year. And whilst it's sat here in the yard, there's something quite special about this. This yard has always been used for holding steamrollers. In fact, in the shed either side of it, there is a steamroller. The yard here is the old Taylor Brother yard, and they started their road rolling business in 1924. And since then, there's always been a fleet of steamrollers based here. And the tradition continues today. There are steam engines here, there are rollers next door to it, and isn't it absolutely wonderful to have something that started so long ago, a tradition that continues into modern day? Sure, this isn't a commercial operation anymore. These are for people who enjoy using them. But the fact that a yard that once commercially operated steamrollers still has active working steamrollers is absolutely fantastic and so rare to find in modern day. That a legacy like this continues. It's different people, but the grandson of the original founders still comes here and still works on engines here. And I think that is absolutely magnificent. It means it more than just a steamroller, it's living history. It really is continuing a legacy, and that just makes it more special. It's fantastic. So we've come back to the beginning of the day when we had to put a fire into this. And as you may be able to tell, I'm already quite excited and we haven't even got the steam up yet. Now, this is a little bit different to the steam engines that I'm used to doing, as that everything is a bit smaller. More so, also, the firebox is all the way hidden around here. And normally when we do a steam engine, it's this moment that we stick a head in and have a look inside the box. I'm not really built to fit into this space. And it turns out that nobody is. The way that you check the inside of the box and make sure your fuse cord plug and everything is okay, is you take the ash pan off, you move the fire bars and you have a good inspection. But the owner of this has done that yesterday and has gone, it's all good. So it's time now to build ourselves a fire, remembering that this is indeed an art form. That each piece must, as ever, be placed in a particular order, something that has taken time and effort beforehand to think about. And people think that lighting a fire is easy and that you can just throw the wood in. Not so. Not at all. It is all thought about, and it's taken me a lifetime to master the art of adding coal and wood into a firebox. Some people think, I make it look easy, but no. Now, quite often when we do this, we have a bucket full of rags and paraffin. Not so on this. This is a new technique. We have this container here, which contains the paraffin, and one of your well-known brands of instant noodles, which will keep away. And the way that we do this now is we take said cup, spill it over our hand slightly, and then just lob it in there, which now means that I'm dirty. Great. Then we grab a rag, and with said rag, put a bit more into there. This has now become my bucket of stuff, like so. Take one rag, just add into there to get it all the paraffin onto the rag, and we get a nice paraffin soaked starting rag. And then from there we grab a shovel, put that down there, and then we reach over and we get the key to start it. Key. And with that, bit of fire, keeping my nice paraffin soaked hand out, and then we just gently place it into the fire. And with that, we're going to chuck another piece or two on top of our little bit of burning wood. Shut the door up, and now we hope. And whilst it's making some steam, I suppose we can start doing the rest of the prep. Right, so the prep. I'm crouching in a rather uncomfortable position here on the footplate. Because first, we have to dip the tank. And no, it's not for diesel, this is for water. And yeah, actually, got a good amount of water in there. We will put the hose in before we leave to give us the best possible range. And whilst I am crouched in this angle here, we have these little oil pots down here. So I've got a filler here of lube oil, and these are what feed the rear axles. So quite important to put some lubrication in, and we shall fill those right up. Right, so that is easily full enough. And then there is the other one on this side, because there is one filler per axle, well, per side of the axle. And fill that one up like that as well. Right, so with that equally overfull, I can now try and unwind myself from this position I've squatted down in and start working on everything that's in front of me. And the best thing about this is there's no kind of guard or anything, so as we're going along, it's going to spray oil in our faces. And actually that makes me very happy. I'm going to get off this looking like I've had a good day on a steam engine. Right, so on the back here, we have these oil pots for the third shaft. And again, there is one of these on each side. That's full, and chuck some oil into that, and now that one's full. So that's all a bit strange. There's also a little hole there, just a nibble there for the steering wheel. And then we get onto stuff that's a little more familiar for me from a railway background, because it's all movie things. Although these bits aren't. There are two oil pots here on the second shaft. They're all conveniently named. You have your crankshaft, and the one that comes after that, the second one, second shaft. The third one's the third shaft. Makes sense, doesn't it? So we have to fill these ones up, and there's quite a fair amount of oil to drop into there. And that's now full, so we can shut that. And then this one, which is rather going to be convoluted to get to because it's underneath the... Actually, that is difficult. Got the epoxy. Everything's in the way. I guess this part of steam engines is everything's in the way. Can I go through? There we go. That's the way we do that. And chuck a bit more oil into there. So that is now full. Next on here, there should be an oil pot, but there isn't. So we're just going to dribble a bit of oil straight down into there. So that's going to oil up basically the gears. We have one side this side and the other one over there as well, doing the same thing. Dribble oil straight down into that, like so. Good job. And now familiar stuff, eccentrics. I can do eccentrics. So we undo these. Careful not to drop them on top of the firebox, because once they've gone in there, I don't think I'll ever recover them. And again, a good amount of oil drops into these. Now, because this is a compound engine, we have 2 cylinders, 2 pistons, and 2 sets of eccentric strap. Obviously on a single one, we don't have one of these, whereas this is a proper engine, so we've got multiple sets. Do those back up. Compared to a locomotive, this is wonderfully easy because I can stand where I'm meant to be and get to everything. I don't need to clamber underneath it or be alongside it or need a pit or anything. It's just reach slightly forward from where you stand. And you may have also noticed, dear viewer, that the entire area around here is fairly oily, which gives you a good impression of how much oil it's going to throw up at me during the run. Am I bothered? No. Am I excited? Yes. Am I excited to look at the pub as I turn up at the pub covered in oil? Yeah, that fills me with joy, actually. It really, really does. So we'll fill that there, like that. And then finally, put that back on this one here as well. It's also, everything's a bit smaller than what I'm used to. Like the eccentrics we have on a steam locomotive are much greater in all sizes, whereas this is quite easy. So they're full. And then next we need to do the big pots on here on the crank itself. So these would be our big ends. And so for which I have a convenient spanner to be able to get onto these things. Period spanner, of course. And give those a little nudge just to turn it. Spanner down there. Now these are fairly decent sized pots. So to fill one of these up, I've just got the tub of oil. So we can just tip that in rather than doing squeezy, squeezy, squeezy forevermore. So we can put that back on. and reach across with our span that and just nip whatever angle of that, nip it up, and then I've got to do this one, which is in the furthest away possible position. You know, I said it's all easy to get to. Turns out I lied. This one's just... You may notice that poking me in my gut right now is the gear selector for high gear, I think. Bottom gear, high gear, first gear. And of course, the other important thing to do are the bearings here for the crankshaft itself, which are these ones here. With the last of my oil in my can. Just that one. And then this one, just, which once again is in a terrible place to get to. Everything else on this has been so good, but this particular one, and with that, boom. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with the pot on the crank there being in the wrong position, I'm used to locomotives where if it's in the wrong position, well, tough luck, son, you've got to get to it. The owner has just reminded me of something, that if it is in the wrong position, you just bring it closer. This is so nice. It's so nice. And apparently it will just keep moving on its own. But you can bring stuff. God, that's so beautiful. How little... I love how little resistance there is in that. That is absolutely spectacular. But you can just move it closer. This is brilliant. Why don't we have more things designed like this, that if it's in the wrong place, you just move it closer? This is absolutely brilliant. And that concludes oiling up here. And so I now need to move over basically where the camera is to do all the forward motion. So I've moved around to the front of, well, the middle, I suppose, to do the motion at this end. So, as with anything, now we're using a slightly thicker oil for this end because it's all on top of the boiler and the firebox. And so the thicker oil will go more runny as we get up to operating temperature. Basically, means it stays in there a tad longer and continues to lubricate in a good way. On to the expansion link itself. Another drop into there. Then we've got the die block all the way in here. Now I am currently kneeling on the running board and it is exceptionally uncomfortable because it is a piece of wood on the side of the engine. Then I need to drop a piece into here like so. And down the side of this. So this is all familiar to me. I understand what I'm doing. And again, it's light. I can see where everything is. I can get to everything. It's wonderful. And I've got a little oil pot here, which is already pretty full. So we'll put a little dribble in there. That's fine. And then we have, you know what? I'll get my familiar little pot there and just put a drop into there. Much better. Then on the side here we've got these little pots here which are tiny, and you know what, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to just use this here and fill it up with the big can, because otherwise it's going to take me about 3 weeks to fill it up with the speed at which the little one comes out. That will do. Then we put just a drop on the link here for the regulator, like so. And then finally we'll use our nice big can to fill up the mechanical lubricator here. And so just drop that. Now this used to have a displacement lubricator, which you can see on the front, but that's been superseded by this thing here, which has drunk apparently all of the oil. Sorted. So there's just a little lubrication hole to do there on the side and one there. And just on the side of the gland itself there's a little bit there. The other thing I need to do is, now that I've filled this up, because this is what pumps oil inside the inner workings of the cylinders, is just to do the windy, and this will make sure we actually get some oil going to the cylinders when we start. Otherwise, well, it only works every time the motion goes, the linkage here clicks this over once and puts a bit of oil to it. So that means that if you haven't actually got the motion moving, there's no oil going there, which means your first several motions are completely dry, which defeats the entire point of having a lubricator. So we'll prime it like this.
Even having done all of this, I'd only actually oiled up one side of the motion, which meant I had to repeat the process over on the other side.
And of course, before we can set off, we do need to fill up the tender, as it's called, with liquid steam. So we'll put that into there, drop that, and hopefully the tap will be turned on and we'll start having some water flowing into that. Well, yes, that sounds very watery, that's good. So it's important to fill up your tender with liquid steam before you go, in case you need more steam on the run. Right, the last things we need to do are, there is a little groove here to put a bit of oil in just on the top of the worm gear here. There we go, a little dribble there. And then again, we put another bit on the divot groove here for the worm gear, just for the bearing of that. Then I need to clamber right underneath, because there is a tiny divot just here for the screw thread. So we'll just put a bit of oil into there like so. And that's that. And then here we have some greases. Now these were originally oil, but now they're not. So we got one here, we'll give it a twist, one here, and then I've got to reach right inside and give that one a twist. With that done, I need to repeat this on the other side. So there's 3 more, and do one oil pot on there. There is across the front here, we put a bead of oil with this just along there as it pivots, across the back as it pivots, and then we just lift up this little cover and put a bead of it just around there, because that's the main pivot of where it actually twists. So you do the other side, and that will complete that. And then the one final touch is we take the spark arrestor here and we clamber our way up on top, being very graceful, and carefully place it inside the chimney. That made a noise. So that's everything. It's prepped, apart from what needs to do that side. It's ready to go. So I guess it's now time for a cup of tea or something before we can take it out. And I'm genuinely excited for taking it out. Now I finished my tea break and it's starting to make those lovely sounds of it's coming back into life. It's starting to burble and it's such an exciting sound. I can do one important thing, which is to reconnect the whistle. Now this cord that you see me having, this used to be white, but it's been on here long enough that it's no longer white. And if you're asking, well, why have you disconnected the whistle? Well, the weight of this, until there's sufficient steam up, there will be enough steam for it to hiss and burble and spit water at you, but there's not enough steam pressure to actually seal the valve. So the weight of this linkage here opens it, so it just sits there bubbling at you, which means that doing anything on it's unpleasant, and we wait until it's got enough steam pressure on it that it now holds it shut. Because if I do that now, it is making steam. Now, this is genuinely exciting.
Which meant it was time to do the obvious and have another cup of tea.
So now I've drunk my tea, and then I've drunk another cup of tea. So there's nothing really to do now apart from just give it a wipe and a polish and dream for a moment that it's mine and I'm getting it ready. Having walked around and made it look like I've given everything a polish, I thought the best thing I could use my time for was to introduce you guys on board the flight deck of a steamroller. So, working from nearest you, we have the handbrake here, which works on that wheel there. There's a water tap here and a water tap here, which work with this steam tap and this steam tap, and that's the injectors. This has 2 injectors on it. It should have an injector and a water pump, but Aveling water pumps are interesting in regard that they only work when you turn them on. They don't continuously pump water. To turn the pump off, you stop the feed to it. So then the pump runs dry, which then makes the pump is less likely to want to work in the long time. So a bit of a bad design. So this one in its life has had a second injector fitted. Moving across, we have the control here, which is our reverser. And then up here, we have the regulator. Behind me is a control that most of you will recognise. This is a steering wheel. Now, that's not a load of kind of slack in it. Well, actually it is. That's as the worm changes and takes up the tension of the chain, which means that driving on the road is an interesting experience with that. Here we have our 2 water gauges with the cut-off isolator at the top and the bottom and the drain underneath it. The drains should have pipework taking it below the rear axle. At the moment they're not fitted, so if we drain them it just comes out on the footplate. Above it here we have our pressure gauge. This thing has a boiler pressure of 200 psi. It is of course a compound, so higher boiler pressure is expected, but it's still quite impressive. That's kind of locomotive levels of boiler pressure. This one here is our lever to engage top gear, and this one here is for bottom gear. So two separate levers, both need to be in neutral, and you select which gear you want. Do not put them both into gear at the same time, that is bad. And then here we have my favourite control. That is the bypass. If the high steam cylinder is stuck in top dead centre, the steam can't leave that to go to the low pressure cylinder. So that lever there is the bypass. You push it in and it will send high pressure steam to the low pressure cylinder. It also makes it make a very nice noise. So that's quite useful. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. These things are remarkably simple. There's really not that much on it. I'm very, very excited to take it out for a run.
And to get to that stage, I had to throw some more coal into the firebox, and it wasn't long before we were ready to move. It turns out manoeuvring a steamroller was a lot more difficult than I'd ever given it credit for.
I'm tired already.
And having manoeuvred my way out of the shed, all I had to do was back up to collect the trailer. The trailer, of course, having extra water on board to increase our range.
Oh, that's going to be... I don't believe that. That, ladies and gentlemen, was more luck than judgment. Is that actually there?
No, it's not there yet.
Oh.
You're in line with it.
Oh, I thought I was there. Because now it's going to shunt it back. That's where we're going.
And once the trailer was all safely connected up, we were ready to head out onto the road.
be honest, it's quite loud on board this, but this is absolutely fabulous. Now, you might notice that currently we're going a bit slower than we were in some of the drive-bys. And I'll be honest, we tried to film this segment with it working at the speed that I'd expect it to work at, and it didn't work. It's just too loud. It's the speed and the sheer power and massive movement. They refer to all this in front of me, and they call it the bee's wings because it is just a flurry of movement. I was talking to the owner about it and said, I've been on engines before, but we travel about the speed we're doing now rather than hammering down at this incredible rate. And he went, well, yes, it's of course, because it's a fully balanced crank. It can spin at that speed, whereas engines with an unbalanced crank, your traditional steam engine, that can't. That can do about this speed, and that's all it can do. Whereas this shifts. It genuinely shifts at an absolutely alarming pace. I wasn't prepared. I was expecting to travel through the countryside around at this speed, just gently making our way through with it, clanging and banging, but being quite happy. Not to be roaring along. And I know we're doing like 8 miles an hour flat out max, and we didn't even hit that. Max can run past us, for God's sake. But it feels so fast, and the amount of concentration that I had to pay just steering it, because there's so much slack. It's like driving a ship on the road. It's such an interesting and different sensation. Everything you have to think in advance. You have to think about what you're doing and modify what you're doing. Start turning in advance and then correct yourself halfway through because the way it moves. You can't just set it like a car and hope it's going to go in the right direction. No, it just goes and does what it wants. And so it's a constant amount of just readjustment. And even if you have got it just about right, because there's a slack in the chains, because the front end pivots anyway, it moves about. So you've got it set and you're like, yes, we've got the right line. And the front end's like, no, actually, I want to steer this way a bit. It's a constant amount of having to do something, having to think about it, having to work with it. It's just absolutely amazing fun. But it's some of the most hard-deserved fun I think I've ever had, because I'm constantly having to think about where I am in the road, how it's going, talking with the driver, working out how much speed we're going to do. Well, I say talk. We're signing to each other because you can't hear anything at full speed. And that is what I can't get over. It's the noise, the speed, and then sensation, the movement, how this thing actually bounces on the road, how it trundles up and down, is something I wasn't expecting, I wasn't prepared for. None of it I was glad. If you take your eyes off the road for a second, you find yourself in a totally different direction, which is absolutely terrifying. But if you do glance down at the motion in front of you as it spins, it's quite alarming, the absolute rate of knots that it's spinning around in front of you. You see that kind of, it looks like, for those of you who played with model sim engines like Mammoth and Willistos, when you've got those at full speed and everything's a blur, it's just like that. You sit there going, oh, that's quite fast. And then slowly, as the day goes on, you get more and more used to it as it's chugging along, and you get this flurry of motion. And you realise just how amazing it is when you contemplate all these moving parts with all the bits of oil that I spent so long oiling up this morning, which have just thrown it everywhere in a spontaneous display of disregard for all the lubrication you've attempted to put into it. Most of it ends up over me and the driver, who is absolutely coated, and it's absolutely magnificent. The sensation of this is unlike anything else. I've driven a fair number of steam locomotives now, and the sensation to driving this is like nothing else. The speed at which we're actually progressing is, well, nothing. We are doing miles an hour, if that. But the speed at which the engine itself is working is amazing. It's the fastest I think I've worked an engine ever. It's just mind-bogglingly amazing. And it takes it, it's quite happy. That's the most amazing thing, is it's just like, this is fine. I don't have any problems with this. Let's just keep on trucking along. It's just absolutely sensational. And of course, there is absolutely no suspension up here whatsoever. we are sprungless. There's nothing. Until I realised there's a stance, you bend your knees slightly squat, and you allow your legs to take all the vibration. Otherwise your teeth are smashing into each other. It's absolutely bonkers. And anybody who has the opportunity to do this, guys, you really, really need to get onto a road steam engine, because it's absolutely ludicrously good fun. I hadn't appreciated just how wonderful this is. The other thing that really has surprised me is the driver has now thrown on, I don't know, 10 rounds of coal, and we've been driving for quite some time to get to this nice quiet road to be able to trundle along this station. It steams remarkably well, and the injector usage has been, well, marginal. It doesn't really need much at all. I'm overly surprised how that is. The other thing that surprises me is just how little I need to do to this regulator to make any change to it. A tiny, tiny nudge and makes a huge difference. I'm now gently trying to ask it to do a little bit more for me. And immediately you can hear that change to it as it does that! Just ridiculous. It gives such an amazing sense of power that it wants to keep going. It's unreal. Oh yes. No. Yes. Oh yes. I genuinely don't think I've ever driven anything which is as fiddly to drive, but also as satisfying when you get it right. When you get it that it's going to happily trundle at this nice speed now, and it's like, I've got this, I'm happy. I've never driven anything where you feel so satisfied by it. And when you keep it in a roughly straight line and you're within the white lines on the road, that it's happening, it goes, yeah. You sit there going, this is awesome, and I am a god of driving. Because it's not easy. It genuinely is not easy. I've never driven anything that has taxed me as much. And I've got to say, I am loving it. Every single second. This is, without doubt, the best fun I've ever had on the road. And I've driven supercars, I've driven Lotuses, Audis, Lamborghinis, Ferraris. And this is, without doubt, the single greatest bit of fun that I've ever had on the road. And that includes driving my own fire engine around, guys. This thing is just phenomenal. I cannot stress how enjoyable it is. But also, how much hard work it is. You really do have to work for your fun to get the sensation of what you're doing. Because I have no idea where I am in the road, I'll be honest. I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm still like, well, the curb's somewhere over there. I mean, I can look through the wheel and see where it is. But in terms of trying to position, it's such a weird thing, because I'm stood to one side, over one wheel, got a chimney in the middle, which blocks my view of where the curb is. I can't see it there because I've got the motion of the flywheel. So actually working out where I am, it's useless. I haven't got a clue where I am. I haven't got a clue if there's anyone down there. There might be a little Jimmy taking a nap down there. Well, he's gone now. I haven't got a chance. Because I can't see him. That's the other thing, the sheer amount of noise this makes. Everybody within about a 5 mile radius knows that we're coming. And then if I do this, it's so loud. I can't get over how magnificently loud the whistle is. Everybody now in the country knows what we're doing with this. But if you don't hear the noise and the motion or the sound of the wheels on the concrete, the whistle just is a wonderful, wonderful noise. I am thoroughly enjoying everything about it. And yes, sure, it is rather helped by the fact that today is a nice day. If the weather wasn't good today, this would be deeply unpleasant. I cannot stress how unpleasant it would be if the rain was coming horizontally through the cab. Couldn't see anything. Today, with like no wind, with everything kind of happy, it's just superb. I'm trying to go uphill, but being at a kind of a slow enough speed so you can hear what we're doing. It's quite a challenge. And it's worth saying, on a day like this, when the sun is up, it's warm, there's not much of a breeze, it's a nice day to be trundling around England's fair roads and the countryside. I can think of nothing I would rather be doing than this. It is absolutely perfection. And this includes my own fleet of vehicles. I'd rather be out here driving this than I would any of them. Because what a thing to do. And of course, if you do hug something like this, this is the only correct thing to do with it, is to drive it. What else do you do? This is what it's meant to do. It's meant to trundle around the road slowly, causing chaos to the local traffic, but generally being alive and a wonderful thing. Now, you may also be wondering, how are you driving this? Because yes, it is a road roller, and in order to drive it, you need a G licence. This is true. In the UK, you need to have a separate licence, which is your road roller licence. That's simple. I'm under instruction. I am being trained. That's fine. The owner, who is the driver, is the one in control. I'm just following instructions. And that's how I like it. So currently, he's watching the fire and the water, and he's in easy reach of everything should something go terribly wrong. Although, at this speed, it's not really likely, because if I look behind me, I can see the lay-by we pulled over in to start filming. We've not really made massive progress at all, no. And of course, I suppose there is that age-old question of, would I have one of these? Do I want this? I don't know. Yes, I want one. I think it's fantastic. Yes, I want to drive it around. But to do this properly, this is a whole day event. To look after a steam engine is, well, it takes up your whole life. And I quite like having a fleet of varied things. If I had a steam engine, it's all I'd ever be able to do. And not that that's a bad thing. But I do like the variety in my life, and I think that's what I want more than this. That said, I do absolutely love this. It is easily the best thing I've ever taken out on the road. There is one other thing that I didn't really appreciate. I talked about how winding the steering is, but I didn't appreciate just how tiring it was. Winding the steering constantly is tiring. Thinking ahead is tiring. The heat is tiring. And I haven't even shoveled any coal yet. I've just kind of stood here. It's just very tiring. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love everybody mad enough to have one and keep it on the road. So with that, the pub beckons, I'm hungry and I'm thirsty, so I'm going to open it up, which means you won't hear anything. What is this noise?
So, we have finally made it to the pub, which is just over there. You see, we made one small miscalculation, and that is not all pubs have car parks which will accommodate a road roller. So we're just down the road. But we have achieved our goal, and the pub very nicely has these wonderful take-out glasses, so we can get our long and well-deserved drink. And so, that's it. This is the best way to take a trip to the pub. It is on a steam engine, and it's the best way to spend your evening or day trundling around the countryside to get a drink from a pub. This is a day very well spent, and needless to say, I have absolutely loved every moment of it. This thing is phenomenally good. This is a phenomenally good way to spend a day, and I am so indebted to the owner for getting in contact and asking us to come and have a go on it and a day out. It's been marvellous. I really cannot stress how good it's been. I've loved it. And the best thing is, now we're at the pub, we've got to turn around and take it back again, which is wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a super piece of kit. It's wonderful it's still here, and I have absolutely loved it. And I will sleep very well tonight. And with that, guys, thank you so much for watching. It's been absolutely wonderful. I hope you've enjoyed it just a little bit as much as I have. And if you have enjoyed this one, how about clicking over here somewhere for another one of the reviews we've done, or over there for the video we did on a stationary engine. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.